What's going on, everyone? My name is Brandon. I'm an indie game dev, and this is the Turtle Tank. So, what I want to go over today is the Unity input system, more specifically the Unity input system with Unity 6. I've noticed there's a lot of videos, of course, about the Unity input system, but a lot of them are a little outdated. Not necessarily outdated, I don't want to say that. You can still very much use them. There's nothing wrong with the videos that are already out there at all, but there's not a lot that showcase using the Unity input system with Unity 6 specifically. It's always previous versions of Unity. So I figured it'd be a good time to, talk about some of the changes that came with the input system and Unity 6 whenever Unity 6 came out. Not a lot changed, to be honest with you, just a few things. But we'll go over all that in this video. This is by no means the best way of reading input at all, but this is usually how I end up doing it. If you think there's a better way of doing it, please leave a comment below on this video, and I would love to have a discussion with you about it. But this is just how I end up doing it, and if anyone out there at all finds this useful, then that's awesome. That's the whole point. But I am, again, by no means saying that this is the best way of doing anything at all. But anyway, with that being said, we'll go ahead and hop into it. So the first thing that I want to kind of touch bases on is the fact that with Unity 6, the Unity input system is default with Unity 6 now. You no longer have to go download it separately from the package manager. Previously, in older versions, you'd have to go to the package manager, go to Unity registry. You could either search for it or you just scroll down a little bit until you find input system, and then you'd have to download it from here. But it's actually by default already installed with Unity 6, so you no longer have to download that separately now. So that's pretty cool. So we'll go back to the game scene here because we don't have to download that, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder. I like to try and keep everything fairly neat. I'm going to name it input. This is where all my input objects are going to go, or items, or whatever you want to call it. We'll go more into that later because we're going to be utilizing scriptable objects for this method of input. I'm in a blank scene, a blank project, I should say, here in Unity. It's just a regular 2D project. This method does work with 2D and 3D. I'm just in a 2D project just because that's what I clicked. But alright, I'll go into this folder, my input folder that I just created, and what we're going to create, we're going to go down and we're going to create an input actions. So we're going to name that controls. Once we get that created, this is extremely important. If you don't do this step, then utilizing this method of reading input won't work for you, because what we need to do is we need to generate a C# class, and it's a little checkbox here. Make sure you don't forget that, because like I said, later on when we're actually scripting, we're not going to be able to read the input at all. I like to do this part here, but it's by no means necessary, and that's just basically changing the file path of where my control C# class will be generated. As you see, by default, it's assets, input, controls. So to break that down, over in the project section, assets, input, and then controls.cs, the C# class would be in here. I don't want it in there. I want to have a scripts folder, and then inside the scripts folder, I want there to be an input folder that will specifically house all of my C# input scripts. So we're going to change it. You don't have to do this. Like I said, if you don't want to do this part, you can just check it and then apply, but we're going to go ahead and change it. So I like to go assets slash scripts. This is going to create the scripts folder. Input slash controls.cs. Be sure at the end, when you're actually writing out your file name, you add the .cs at the end, because that's the actual file. All right, so we'll go ahead and apply that. Okay, now in the project view, you'll see we have a scripts folder. Inside there we have an input folder, and inside the input folder we have our controls C# script. You don't actually need to go inside this script at all. You can if you want. I'm not going to. All we need is the script itself, so that way we can reference it later on in a separate script. And that will enable us to read the input that we put inside of our input action asset that we created earlier. All right, so let's go ahead and open up controls. I'm going to dock it up here in the corner. This is our input action editor, and as you can see, we have an action map section here. We have an action section, and then the action properties. This is where all the magic happens, basically. So we're going to go ahead and create a new action map. We're going to name it player. Whenever you create a new action map, it automatically, by default, will create a action that an input action that is correlated with that individual action map. I'm not going to delete this. I'm just going to rename it to move. We're going to simulate like we're reading movement input for this video. After I get this created, also I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a jump action, input action, so that way you can see how you can go about updating your script and your input reader to read multiple forms of input. But anyway, for this we'll move forward. So we got our move input action here. It's very important that we change this from a button to a value for the action type, and then the control type will change from any to vector2. All right. Anytime you create an input action, by default, it'll have a binding already created. So we'll just go ahead and utilize this, and this will be our gamepad or controller binding. So over here on the path, we'll click on gamepad and then left stick. So this is going to read the left stick input of any gamepad. So we want to also add WASD. So we're going to hit this little plus button. It's going to add a new binding. And the one we're going to add is add up, down, left, right composite. Cool. As you see, we have a 2D vector. We're going to go ahead and rename that to WASD. And then we'll expand and go ahead and bind these to the appropriate keys. So for up, W, down, S, left, A, and then right, D. All right, so this is our movement input action. We'll leave it here for now. We're not going to do too much else, and we're just going to go ahead and click save. You can do autosave if you want. I normally don't do it. I like to save it manually, but that's just a personal preference. Okay, so now we'll go back to our scene view. And next, we're going to go down to our scripts folder here inside the input folder, and we're going to go ahead and create the actual input reader. This is what's going to read the input. Okay, so we'll right click on here, go to create, scroll to mono behavior script. So this is something else that I noticed changed. It's just basically verbiage that changed from previous versions. So previously, when you would go to make a C# script, you would go to create, and this would say C# script. Now it says mono behavior script, but it's the same thing. So don't get confused by that. If you're watching an older version of anything and it says, oh, let's go create a C# script, it's just in Unity 6 they changed it to mono behavior script. All right, let's go ahead and create that. We're going to rename this. We'll call it Input Manager. All right, let that compile. And then we're going to open that up. Okay, we got the script opened up here. I'm going to go ahead and set my scene up like this, or I guess my workspace up like this. I usually like to have my Visual Studio over here on the left, and then my Unity over on the right, mostly because I use a ultra wide screen. And it's just a little easier for me. I like the workflow of it. So, and then plus for the sake of this video, it'll be a little bit easier for me to reference things that I'm talking about. So that way you can understand a little bit better of what I'm meaning by what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and open up the control input action editor again, because I want to show a few things to you as I'm doing it. Okay, so in our script, our input manager script, we're going to go ahead and delete the default functions. We're not going to need those. We don't want this script to be a mono behavior because, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to utilize scriptable objects. So we're going to actually make our input manager a scriptable object. So we're going to delete mono behavior. We're going to make it a scriptable object. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to directly tie our input manager with our controls.cs C# class that we generated earlier from our controls input action asset. Okay? To do that, all we're going to do is on the same line, we're going to do a comma. And there is actually an interface inside this script that we're going to reference. We're going to basically make our input manager implement the interface that's within the controls script. So to do that, we're going to do iPlayer. Sorry about that. iPlayer actions. Okay. So what you'll notice right off the bat is we're getting an error, and it's not looking like it's going to go through. So to fix this, it's super simple. All you're going to do is you're going to click where you know the line that you want to fix, right? So iPlayer actions, we're going to click there. You're going to hold Control on your keyboard, and you're going to press period. All right. So as you see, we have a list of different quick fixes that the game thinks we're trying to do. The one that's most important is this one, iPlayer actions using static controls. We want to click that. What that's going to do is it's going to put a namespace at the top saying using static controls. This is basically directly referencing and allowing us to use the interface that's within the control script that we generated earlier. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can, so that way you actually understand what it is we're doing versus me just writing the code and then you following along. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer video, mostly from me just explaining things. Alright, so we still are getting an error here. So it seems like it's not working, but it is. All we have to do is now we're going to implement the actual interface. So we're going to do the same exact thing that we've done before. So I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to press period. As you see, we get the same quick fix menu, and it says Implement Interface. That's the one we want to click. Once we click Implement Interface, the squiggly line goes away, and it adds another namespace up here using UnityEngine.InputSystem, and then it generates a function for us. It's called onMove. We have an onMove function. This is basically our move input action that we created over here. So anything that we put inside this function is going to be directly correlated with the input action move that we created in our input action asset earlier. Okay, so we don't need the default code that is generated within this function. We're going to delete that. And above that, what we're going to do now is we're going to create a reference for our controls. Call that controls. That's the script again, like I said. And then what we have to do is we have to enable our controls. So on enable. And what we're going to say here is we're going to say if controls equals null. So in other words, if there is no instance of controls being enabled in our scene when the game starts, we're going to create, we're going to say controls equals new controls. That's going to create a new version of the controls instance, like I mentioned. What we're also going to do is we're going to say controls.player. That's accessing. When you do controls.player, we're accessing this action map that we created earlier. .set callbacks, and then this is basically looking for this interface. But because we're utilizing this interface, you can use this in here, and you don't have to make any kind of references to anything else here other than this specific script. Okay. Then once we get that finished, we're going to go outside of the if statement, and all we're going to do is we're going to enable the controls. So we're going to say controls.player.enable. Okay, cool. So that's all looking good there. So how we're going to actually read this input is going to be by utilizing events. Okay. So to do this, we're going to say public, because we want to be able to access these events from any other script in the game. Event action. The action we want to read is a vector2, because that's what our move input action is. It's a vector2. So we want to be able to read a vector2. And we're going to name it move event. Cool. All right. So we're almost done really with the base of our input manager here. There's just a few more things that we have to do. So we have our event set up, but if we was to try and use this at all, it's not going to do anything, okay? Because our onMove function isn't doing anything, okay? So here, what we're going to do, we're going to say move event. We're going to do a question mark and a period. And what the question mark is doing is it's basically validating that we can actually use our event. Like, it's a valid reference to the event. I suppose that's a good way to say it. It's not super important, but it does save you quite a bit of if statements utilizing the question mark. Anyway, I just want to I want to emphasize these things because it's important to try your best to always write good, clean code where you can. I'm not a professional by any means, but I try to do that where I can in most scenarios. All right, so we're going to say move event, and we're going to invoke context dot read value vector2, and that's it. And that's basically what we're doing. All right, so we're going to invoke this event, which basically means we're going to activate this event. We're taking the context, which is inside this function. We're going to read that value. That value is a vector2, which is then going to correlate to our move event. All right, and that's pretty much it for this, other than one thing. We need a way of utilizing this object as a scriptable object. Okay? So up here above or underneath our namespace, what we're going to do, we're going to kind of press enter, give ourselves a little room. We're going to put square brackets. We're going to say create asset menu. We're going to do parentheses, file name. This is basically what the file is going to be called when we create it in the project hierarchy over here, okay? So file name, we're going to say, we're just going to call input manager. And then the menu name, we're going to go over, and we're going to say input/input manager. All right. So this is our input manager script. All complete. This is all we need to do for the input manager. So we're going to save this script. We're going to go over into Unity now. Let everything compile. So now we're going to actually create the input manager. So I want to do that up here in the input folder. So to do that, I'm going to click my input folder. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to create. And then I'm going to go to the bottom where I find input. This input is what we just created right here with the menu name. See, input/input manager. So we'll go over to create, scroll down, input manager, like we said. And when we create this, whenever I click input manager, it's going to create a scriptable object called input manager. Okay. There we go, input manager. You can rename it if you want to. We're only ever going to have one of these, so I'm not going to rename it. I'm just going to leave it as input manager. All right, there we go. Cool, so we have the input manager created, but we're still not technically, I guess, reading quote-unquote input. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to create we're not going to create a full character controller in this video. If you want to see that, let me know. I will definitely create a character controller, show you how that goes and everything like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mock-up of just something very simple. We'll call this the player, just to show you that we're actually reading the input. All right, so in the scripts folder, I'm going to create another folder. We'll call this, it's just for the video, I'll just call it player. I messed it up, but it's okay. Try that again. All right, player. All right, inside the player folder, we're going to create another mono behavior script. We're going to call this, I don't know, player movement, something like that. Okay. Of course, if you was to actually try and create a real player, you would add, your collider, your rigid body, all that stuff. We're not going to do that for this video. Like I said, we're just showing you how to actually read input, and then you can do the logic on your own. Or again, like I said, if you want me to do a video on that, I can. All right, so we're going to take our player movement script. We're going to move it over to the player, and then we're going to open up the player movement script. All right, so in here, this is where we're going to actually start reading the input for the player. So we're going to do a serialized field, private, input reader, sorry, not input reader, input manager. All right. And then we need normally, so I'm going to do this as public just so it's viewable in the inspector. Actually, you know what? I'll do a serialized field because that way it's viewable in the inspector and it's still private like we want. So we'll do serialized field, but if you're doing this on your own, you don't have to make this a serialized field at all. You can just make it private, and that will work perfectly. This does not need to be a serialized field. I'm only making it a serialized field so that way I can actually show you that we're reading input. But anyway, so serialized field private, and then we're going to say vector2, and we're going to do move input. So this is going to be our move input that we pull from our input manager. Okay, and anytime like if you was to expand on this, like I'm going to later whenever I do the jump, you need, in whatever script you're trying to read this input, you need a reference to the input manager, and you need a variable that's going to hold the input that you get from the input manager. Okay, so from here, what we're going to do is we're going to say on enable, and then we're going to go underneath that and we're going to say on disable. And in these, we're going to actually subscribe to the event, the move event from the input manager script. Okay, so we're going to say input manager dot move event plus equals, and we're going to call this handle move. Okay, that's all we need. And we're going to copy this. We're going to go down to on disable. We're going to paste, and instead of plus equals, we're going to say minus equals. And what we're doing is we're subscribing to the event using the plus equals. And then down here, we're unsubscribing once it's disabled. As you see, we have a squiggly line here, and that's because we don't actually have a function inside our script that's called handle move. So we'll go ahead and create that. An easy way to do that is to, again, hold control and press period, and it's going to say generate method handle move. So yeah, we'll go ahead and generate the method handle move. But it put it in a weird spot, so you can, for us, we'll move it down. I didn't mean to do that just then. Control Shift Alt, and then we'll just move it down underneath on disable. There we go. Alternatively, you could just write it out. You could just do private void handle move, and then you want a vector2, and then I'm going to rename this vector to move input. Hit enter. All right. We'll delete the text there. And this is what your function should look like. Private void handle move vector2 move input. So inside here, we're going to say move input, which is our vector2 up here, move input, equals move input. So what we're saying is this vector2 move input equals this vector2 move input, which is what's being subscribed to in our on enable and on disable. So with that in place, we are officially ready to start reading input. Cool. So we'll just say, we'll do private void move, not on mouse over. Come on. There we go. All right, so we're going to create a function called move, and all we're going to do is we're going to say let's see, we're going to do update. Actually, here's what we'll do. Debug.log, not move, come on. Debug.log move input in the update function. That should allow me to just read the input. All right. Let me turn this off. I don't want to play in maximized. Sorry about that. We're going to play in focused because I want to be able to view everything that's going on here. All right. We'll hit play. Click on the player, and if I click, oh, made a mistake here. All right. So in my player movement script, I didn't reference the input manager here. So to do that, I'm going to take my scriptable object, the scriptable object that I created, not the script. We're going to do the scriptable object, and we're going to drag that in right here on our player script. So now we should be good, and it should start working. So yeah, if I press up, you see on the Y, it goes to 1. If I press down, we have -1. Left is -1. Right is +1. So we are officially reading the input. I don't have a controller here with me right now, but if I did, it would work the exact same way. All right, so yeah, perfect. There we go. Sorry about that. Cool, so we're reading input. That's exactly what we wanted to do. All right, so now we have all this set up. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into our, let's say now we have everything set up, we have our movement set up in the player and everything like that, and we decide we want to create a jump or something else, some other form of controls that the player will have. So what you will do is you'll go into your controls. Let me make this a bit smaller here. You'll go into your controls, input, action, asset, and you're going to create a new action. You're going to click to create a new action. You're going to say jump. And we're going to leave the jump as a button. You don't want to change it because what a button does is it basically will trigger an event that says true or false, just like a Boolean. Is basically what it does. All right. We're going to go to the binding and we will listen for spacebar. And while we're in here, I don't have a controller, so it doesn't really matter, but I'll go ahead and add the input for a controller, so button south. And then make sure you save it. So we're going to save it. And that's weird. We just got an error. All right. Let's see what's going on. So if we go into the scene view, and if you look over in the scripts, also our input manager turned red. Okay. The iPlayer actions has a red line underneath it once again, just like in the beginning. This is because when we saved the control script, we created a new interface within the control script called onJump, or a function, I should say, called onJump inside the control script. It's giving me an error here because there's no reference to onJump in our script. So to fix that, just like we did before, you're going to click on iPlayer Actions, you're going to hold Control, and you're going to click Period. And you're going to click Implement Interface, just like before. And boom, look at that. It automatically created another function, but this time called onJump. All right, cool. And let's go ahead and delete this text here. No more errors in the input manager, so let's Control S, save that. Let's go back into Unity, let that compile. Okay, and then the error goes away. We no longer have the error. And just for good measure, we'll save the input action asset again. While we're over here, I'll go ahead and just save my scene in Unity as well. All right, cool. So we don't have any more errors, and everything's working as intended. So if you was to ever try and create any other controls, you would do that same exact thing. So let's say we get the jump done and you want to add a function for interacting, or not a function, some controls for interacting. You create your input action, interact. We'll leave it a button. We'll add the binding. We'll just do this really quick. E, you'll save it. You'll come over into your input manager, Control, period, implement interface, Control S, you'll come back, and then everything is going to be fixed. And this is how you can use any form of controls that you want, okay? Or I guess add more controls to this method. All right, we're not going to do anything with interacting. We're just going to do jump. So I'll show you how to do jump because it's the same way that you do jump, you'll do interact because they're both buttons. Anytime you're going to do a button, you're going to do it this way using this method. So we're going to create a new event at the very top. We're going to say public event action. This time, instead of vector2, it's going to be a Boolean because our jump function or our jump input action is a button. We're going to say jump event. All right, and then on jump, we're going to invoke that event. Oh, sorry. First, what we're going to do is we're going to say if. This is going to be a little bit different than the vector2 because we're working with booleans now. So I'm going to say if context, which is, again, this context here. Sorry if I'm breaking this down too much. I just want to make sure that you guys have it under control and you know what I'm talking about. If I'm doing too much and I'm going too slow, please be sure to let me know in the comments and I'll make the corrections. If context.performed, which is basically saying if this button is being clicked. If the button is being clicked, we're going to fire the event. So jump event, again, question mark, period, invoke, and we're just going to set this to true. So if the button is being pressed, true. It's going to read true. And then underneath that, we'll say else if context dot canceled. So if the button is released, we'll do jump event, invoke, false. And that's it. You'll do the same thing that you do here for any other button. So if you want to do interact, you'll do the same thing, but instead of jump event, it'll be interact event or whatever you name your event. All right. So we'll save that. And let's say in the player movement now we want to read this input. So we're going to do it the same exact way that we did the move input. So for this, what we're going to do, I will leave it serialized. I'll make this serialized as well just so you can see that it works. We'll do a serialized field. But again, for yours, you don't have to make these serialized. Just leave them private. We'll say private bool jump input. And then we're going to have to subscribe to that event as well. So what you can do is you can Control C, Control V, copy and paste. Instead of move event, we're going to change that to jump event. And instead of handle move, we're going to say handle jump. All right. And we're going to copy that and paste it down here. And again, we're going to change it from plus equals to minus equals. All right. But we have the same issue that we had earlier. We don't have a function that actually will handle the jump. So instead of generating one this time, I'll just write it. So we'll say private void handle jump bool, sorry, not capital, bool jump input. And there we go. And inside this, we're going to say jump input equals jump input, just like our move input. So now, if we was to try and use this, you just plug it wherever it is that you want it to be read, and it will start reading it, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's go over to the game. Let's hit play. Click on the player here. Now you see we have jump input. It's set to false. I'm going to hit space, and as you see, it's turning on and off. So we're reading the input for our player jump. Cool. We're reading movement. We're reading our jump input. And that is exactly how you can go about reading input in Unity 6 using the new input system. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, tell me what you liked. If there's any kind of feedback that you want to provide, please go for it. I would love to receive any feedback that you have to offer. I'm kind of new to this whole thing, making videos and everything like that, so any feedback is fantastic. I would love to have anything to go off of for the next one. If there's anything you want to see in the next video, please just let me know. If I oversimplified or if I talked too much about things, please let me know. Again, I'm going to try and get the hang of this stuff. The more I go, but I can't do that if you guys don't let me know what you like or what you don't like. All right. Please utilize this method of reading input in your games. It's very expandable. I personally enjoy this method quite a bit. I find that I get it knocked out pretty quick once you get the hang of it, and you can have a great functioning player controller that has controller support, keyboard support, mouse support, whatever it is that you want very quickly. But I guess that's enough of me yapping here. I appreciate you for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, let me know what you liked. Let me know what you think. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.